Board. Welcome to the June 2nd Board of Zoning Appeals Site Design meeting.
Oh, hello.
We all there?
Yes, I think.
Lee, you can go to the next slide. All right, virtual meeting protocol. Staff will control the slides displayed throughout the meeting. Applicants, staff, board members, and members of the public should give their name first whenever speaking. Applicants and members of the public must be sworn in before speaking for the first time. Only attendees who have registered to speak before the deadline at noon today may speak during the meeting. Video and microphone have been disabled for all attendees. Attendees will only be given the capabilities to speak when they are called on during the public comment period. Board members who need to recuse themselves from voting will be temporarily removed from the meeting and readmitted prior to addressing the next item. If the board needs to go into executive session, they will call into a separate conference line, and all video and audio on Zoom will be temporarily turned off until they are ready to return to the regular meeting. Chat has been disabled for everyone, and of course, this meeting is being recorded. And with that, I'll hand it over to our chairman, Joel Adrian.
All right, thank you, Eric. This is the June 2nd, 2021 meeting of the City of Charleston Board of Zoning Appeals Site Design. Present are Amanda Barton, Ruthie Ravenel, Calvin Yuji, Jeff Webb, Paula Murphy, Andrew Hargett, myself, Joel Adrian. Present from the planning staff are Eric Schultz and Lee Batchelder. These proceedings are being recorded. We ask that those who speak identify themselves for the record. We will conduct this meeting in usual fashion. We will first receive information from city staff about the application and their recommendation. If the recommendation is favorable and no one objects to the application, usually the Board of Zoning Appeals treats the matter as being uncontested and passes it as a matter of course. If, however, the city recommends against the application or there is opposition to the application, we treat the application as contested and hear from the applicant and anyone else who is in favor of the application. Next, we hear from anyone opposed, followed by a short rebuttal from the applicant. We will then close the public hearing portion of the meeting for that particular application and open discussion to the Board of Zoning Appeals members only. We will then make a decision to approve with conditions, or deny the application. The Board of Zoning Appeals Site Design has the authority to do three things. 1, hear appeals to decisions of the zoning administrator. 2, grant special exceptions, a fact-finding function of the board. And 3, grant variances to the zoning ordinance if the application meets the hardship test outlined in section 54(9)24 of the ordinance. The board may deliberate and make a final decision on a matter by a majority vote of members present at the hearing and qualified to vote, provided that not less than a quorum are present and qualified to vote. For a variance to be granted, the Board of Zoning Appeals must make the following findings. A, there are extraordinary and exceptional conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property. B, these conditions do not generally apply to other property in the vicinity. C, because of these conditions, the application of the ordinance to the particular piece of property would effectively prohibit or unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property. And D, the authorization of a variance will not be a substantial detriment to the adjacent property or to the public good. The character of the district will not be harmed by the granting of the variance.
Very good, Lee. Next slide, Lee. Yep, there's the, Lee just covered that. Yep. All right, public comment period. Order on each application. The chair now each application, staff presentation and recommendation. Staff will call an applicant to present their application after being sworn in by the chair. Staff will open the public comment period to receive comments from registered attendees in favor. First spoken, then written. Each speaker will be sworn in by the chair. Staff will then recognize registered attendees for public comment in opposition after a speaker is sworn in, first spoken, then written. Staff will recognize the applicant for a short rebuttal, and then the chair will close the public comment period in board discussion. Providing comment, if you submitted a request to speak on an item before the deadline, staff will call on your name when it is your turn to speak and enable your microphone. Your microphone will be disabled after you are done speaking. You may only speak once for each item, and you must state your name and address for the record, or you will not be permitted to provide comment. Next slide. And finally, board discussion. Following public comment period, board members can make comments, ask questions, and make motions. After a motion and a second, board members will vote aye in favor or nay not in favor. If the vote is not unanimous, the chair will poll each member for their vote. The chairman will announce the vote on the motion and the final decision on the application. Again, if a board member needs to recuse him or herself, they will be temporarily removed from the meeting and placed back in the meeting at the start of the next agenda item. If the board needs to go into executive session, they will call into a separate conference line, and all video, audio on Zoom will be temporarily turned off until they are ready to return to the regular meeting. And with that said, Mr. Chairman, we have no deferrals, so we will start with item A1. These are the long form results from the April 28th, 2021 special meeting. So there's a couple slides there, and then a couple slides of the May 5th, 2021. So there you had the longer agenda there, the 28th, and then the May 5th.
All right. So I will, I guess I'll just ask if there's anybody that has a motion for approval of the minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
All right. So motion by Ms. Barton. Who was that second?
Paula.
All right. So motion by Amanda Barton for approval, Paul Murphy for second. And then I'll just go through the roll and just say aye in favor, nay not in favor. Ms. Barton,
I in favor.
Mr. Ravenel,
I in favor.
Mr. Yuji,
Aye in favor.
Mr. Webb,
Aye in favor.
Ms. Murphy,
I in favor.
Mr. Hargett,
Aye in favor.
and Mr. Adrian is aye in favor. So it is 7-0. Minutes are approved. So now we'll go on to item A2.
Okay, item A2.
And this is King and Lion Street. The application number is 2106-0282. The TMS numbers are 460-0802-007, 010 through 013, 015, 109 through 114, 117 through 122, and 124. The items for this application are request a variance from section 54.327 to allow the removal of 6 grand trees. Request a variance from section 54.327 to allow the relocation of 1 grand tree. Request a special exception from section 54.327 to allow the removal of 1 grand tree. Request a variance from section 54.327 to omit the 15 protected trees per acre requirement. It is zoned GBA.
Very good. Next slide, Lee. Okay, so this is a revised application. They revised it to drop 1 tree from the removal list and to a relocation list. So that's just a revised application. This is Gray Star's revised hardship test explanation. These are the parcels involved. Again, bound by Line, King, and St. Philip, and just north of the alley, Rogers Alley, that's traverses from St. Philip to King. Zone GB. Aerial shot, again, you all recall that this was heard last month, but deferred at the direction of the board. So this involves the abandonment of Ackerman Court. There's a process going on as well to abandon Rogers Alley. There's a large project to the south called Liberty on King, and then the Gray Star portion to the north. So surface parking lot, an area of gray where existing buildings have been previously removed. And of course, the green blobs in the middle of the block are the trees that we looked at last month as well. So this is their revised package, BZA submittal. So you can see the scope of their project. It does wrap around the properties that are not under control of the Evening Post. And it involves a very large structure with a, yeah, go ahead, Lee, that's good. Survey. Again, north side survey. Individual lot survey. Okay, so here we have it. So this shows the position of the grand trees, the large circles. The new blue gray tree in the plan northwest corner is the proposed relocation of a tree, and I'll show that next. But again, B grade trees, C grade, and D grade trees. And you can see very large structure with a parking deck, and then working very closely with the neighboring community and neighborhood council, stepping down to a series of townhouse looking type structures on St. Philip, and then of course a corner building at Line and King. So what I did here is I blew up the image, and basically I'll get into an explanation, but they, if you recall, at the direction of the board, they felt they left understanding that they were to study saving tree number 2, which is the tree closest to King, and tree number 6. I may have those numbers reversed, but the one closest to St. Philip Street. Well, they'll get into their explanation of their studies with the architect and other individuals, landscape architects. But the idea of relocating a tree came to be, and they engaged a team to study that, and I'll get into that. But they're going to attempt to seek your approval to relocate the center tree to that location, plan northwest. Next slide. So you also asked for, a plan. This is conceptual. Obviously, they have a long road ahead of them with BAR, but this is a really, in my opinion, a fine exhibit of their seriousness about their proposal to relocate a tree and how that would fit into the overall plan. So as we discussed last month, there is a pretty significant pedestrian alley being proposed between the Gray Star project and the Liberty that's a little off from Bogard, from the terminus of Bogard, but that's because there's a couple properties they don't control, and have that important pedestrian connection for the neighborhood to the west to get to King Street. So the pedestrian path as shown is varying in width, but they actually modified the building on St. Philip Street to incorporate the crown of one of the live oaks. And then of course you can see the rest of the alleys and walkways, and then the point of ingress and egress. The lighter pink is where the vehicular traffic enters and exits the garage, wrapped by retail and residential units. Next slide, please. This is an image they came up with that you're looking basically in Bogard, the east end of Bogard, looking across St. Philip at the beginning, the head, or the terminus of that pedestrian path, and how that tree would nestle in there. Next slide, please. This is the image that the applicant provided of all trees proposed to be removed and relocated. Next slide. So this is the tree, and I've met on site twice with the team. The first time with the Gray Star folks and architects and landscape architects, and standing studying these 3 trees, it was my opinion that this one's the healthier of all, has the better leaf color, the better leaf size. Again, this tree is mid-block and it's kind of lopsided already due to the structures that were on the north side that were removed a couple of years ago. So it's actually helping them bring it across, and then they'll have their new structures to the north of this tree if it's you all agree that it can be moved. So it's a 37-inch live oak, grade B, to be relocated. That's it. It's in that existing condition in that parking lot island. So what the second meeting we had on site, and you'll be introduced soon to a member of their team, Mr. Paul Cox, flew up from Texas, and he is I believe a principal in the company called Environmental Design. They have moved numerous large trees around the country, abroad, and their success rate is very good. So he agreed that this tree is the best of the two or the three, the King Street, the St. Philip Street, and this middle one. And they're going to start, upon approval, if the board agrees, to jackhammer out the asphalt and the curbing and start to do some root investigating to determine the exact root ball size they would need to successfully move this tree. So next slide, Lee. So this is just a couple images I pulled off of their website, and they actually have a couple of these methodologies trademarked where they use air balloons. It's called airlift. So they'll trench around the tree, get steel underneath it, and then they use these inflatable tubes, if you will, and they roll the tree to its new location and then deflate and place it at its new elevation and home. So just a couple images there. Next slide, please. So not to be forgetful of the other trees. So this is the 27-inch laurel oak. Again, it's growing in the fence. This is on the St. Philip side, grade D. This is the tree closest to St. Philip Street. And if you note the branching structure of this tree, again, it's in that island, that large little landscape island, the curbing. But when they studied the canopy, they felt that this one wasn't the ideal tree, but this is a 22.528 live oak B. Next slide, Lee. This is the heading east. This tree, we looked at it, but we didn't like the split per se, the double leader for a move. It had a higher canopy, but again, it looked a little weaker in its crown. This is the magnolia, 7.5, 7.5, 8, 11 southern magnolia, again, kind of buried in that same little landscape strip, grade C. Next slide. This is the tree that we all looked at and discussed at length at the last meeting. Again, it's in tight or limited soil volume today. It has a lot of, they felt that there may be a lot of conduit and electrical just stuff around it due to that gate, the proximity to the King Street sidewalk, trying to cut the root ball on that side. So again, they felt that this wasn't the ideal tree. 14, 18, 18.5 live oak. The 24-inch pecan, again, some close-ups with the pockets of decay, storm damage, grade D. And then the special exception is the 27.5 elm, grade D, American elm. So the arborist had all his notes about those trees. So with that said, staff recommends approval with the following conditions. Must plant 212.75 caliber inches of native canopy trees on the project site and or make a contribution to the city street tree program. That number has dropped because we backed out the 37-inch live oak from the original number. The must plant 250 caliber inches of native canopy trees on the project site and make a contribution. That's for the number of required protected trees to be maintained, and we'll go back and look at that exhibit if we have to. I'm sure we will. but all those other black circles with X's are the protected trees along fence lines and what have you. Must use 4-foot chain link fence as tree protection barricades as needed. Must provide a landscape plan for staff review and approval. We've got the starts of that in progress with that. Must provide staff with a good faith documentation to use the repurposed live oak wood in the project. Ben Levitrell with Gray Star has used some really fancy wood in the phase 1 project. And number 6 is new, specific to the relocated tree. A, must submit a tree preservation plan to be approved by staff that states the necessary protocols to ensure the tree's survivability, to include pre-move preparation steps, watering system and monitoring, post-move monitoring, and documentation of said protocols to be submitted to the city upon completion of each protocol, just so we can track their movement and, make sure that this is a huge investment. I've already heard from Gray Star that if they're going to do this, they're not going to not see out the necessary monitoring and watering for the tree. Must provide 6-foot chain link fence with an access gate and marked with appropriate TBZ signage. So we talked about its new location. They're very much aware. Again, what we don't know is the exact root ball size, that diameter, and they may have to modify their building. But, the building will either be skinned with brick or stucco or whatever, so that north side, if the tree is successfully relocated upon your approval, we have to be very conscious about being able to build the building without getting into the tree. So 6-foot chain link fence. And then in the event that the tree does not survive, up to 6 years. So we're going to hear from the experts that move trees all over the world. But we felt that up to 6 years, the developers to provide a letter to be on file in the plan case indicating that the tree will be mitigated in the form of 100% of the deviations lost in the form of 2 6-inch diameter live oaks to be planted in the space of the relocated tree, and then the residual deviations in the form of a contribution to the city street tree program, and in the amount of that as stated there, $6,875. And again, that's a number that was just adopted. We got that number from Parks Department. They just had their street tree manual approved by City Council. All right, so with that said, we have to identify the team. And we have Ben Levitrell, Mr. Paul Cox, good afternoon, Ben. Can you hear us?
Hey, Eric, I can hear you just fine. Can you hear me?
Yes. Paul, and who else would you like to be promoted?
Paul.
Paul Cox, yes. We got a huge echo.
Sorry about that. Better?
A little better. Any other member, Ben, of your team?
I think that'll do it. Eric?
All
Okay,
right.
this is Chairman Adrian. I'm going to swear you all in if you would just answer, then state your name, full name for the record, your address, and the floor will be yours. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
I do.
Excellent.
Ben Liebetrow, Gray Star, 465 Meeting Street, Suite 500.
Paul Cox, Environmental Design, 5463 Jason Street, Houston, Texas, 77096.
All right.
Great.
Thank you. I guess, Ben, the floor is yours and you can begin to present.
Great. Thank you, Chairman. Again, this is Ben Liebetrow with Gray Star. I'm going to be speaking on behalf of Gray Star and Evening Post. We discussed this at length last month, so I probably won't review the entire project program unless the board would like any further review on their questions. But I'd like to reiterate our support last month from Canterbury Elliottboro Neighborhood Association, as well as a few others. And, to summarize, I think the feedback we got from y'all as the board last month was that we were deferred. We were asked to restudy the site with the hope that we could save, perhaps one of the perimeter trees. And none of our variance requests were granted. So we took that advice, we took that feedback, we immediately went to work with multiple consultants to come up with a solution that, we thought would not only potentially save a wonderful grand oak, but also kind of enhance our project in this community. Tonight I'm gonna focus on the changes made and addressing the feedback. So again, from the start of this project, we mentioned it last month, community engagement, discussions with city staff, council, mayor's office, Canterbury Elliottboro. It's been a priority for us. I think we listened well, we garnered the support of these folks, and we're very, very proud of that support. So, piggybacking on that theme, per y'all's advice, we started thinking about and studying how we could further benefit, further enhance the city and the neighborhood, and really came up with this idea of a tree relocation. I can tell you that we and I believe city staff are really excited about this proposal for a number of reasons. I think number one, this allows us to potentially kind of handpick the tree to be saved. Frankly, and I think Paul will speak to this in a second, and the experts that we spoke to, we centered on tree number 3, which is what's circled on the screen as the center tree. It's the best spread, the best health, the best form, very strong central trunk, great canopy, and in a healthy state. So in our opinion, this tree is really kind of superior to either of the trees that were discussed at the last BZA meeting. So in our mind, I think we're kind of upgrading the saved tree here. Big plus, and hopefully be able to keep the best tree on site by moving it kind of from the center, which, frankly, is right in the middle of our parking deck, to a more public location. Both our local arborist and Paul, who'll speak in a moment, agreed on this tree. Number 2, location. Greystar has voluntarily incorporated a bunch of pedestrian alleyways throughout this project. And I think in the case of the east-west alley, this was a great selling point for the neighborhood. It's something they really liked. This is an element of the design that they loved. And then, we said, well, how could we further enhance this alley? And so we came up with the idea of moving this tree to the north side of that alley. We want to use this tree to almost open up the mouth of this pedestrian alley to St. Philip, to the neighborhood. And how great that we can now have this large space, this small pocket park that would not only be kind of an amazing entry point to the alley, but also kind of a small public gift to the city and the neighborhood, and all framed and shaded by this kind of majestic, kind of large live oak. So again, huge community enhancement and way of making, I think, what was once private trees in the interior of the site more of a public benefit. You'll notice we not only included that illustrative site plan, but we also tried to show, conceptually what this might look like via the perspective. I would note that this relocation does result in a substantial reduction in building footprint for the project. I think keeping either of the other trees discussed kind of in place, of course, would result in a reduction in building footprint. But we thought if we're going to lose square footage, which certainly hurt, we wanted the trade-off to be that of benefit to the community and visible and usable to others besides, just our residents here. So for the reasons stated, we believe this is a huge win-win. Keep the best tree on site, allow its new location to benefit the city, future alley, by creating a wonderful canopy for not only the park, but the alley. We went through the tests last month. I won't go through them again, but I would like to highlight the addition to number 4 on enhancing the community, not deterring from it. Lastly, I'm sure there's questions about the move itself, and I've asked what we believe, and I think many others believe to be the kind of foremost expert in this space to come speak to y'all. In short, Greystar is not a tree moving expert. I've told Eric that on site. We flew Paul out to the site from Texas. He spent a day with us out there. We had city staff, consultant team, and I'll just say he has the utmost confidence in this move and the viability of it going forward. There are many, many steps, many obligations that Greystar will need to take on. We're ready. We're committed to fully defer to Paul, fully defer to his team on not only the preparation, not only the execution, but probably most importantly, the care of the tree after the move. This is all coming at a massive, massive cost to the project. That's in addition to mitigation inches, but it's something that we are really, really excited about. I think that, what you're seeing here could be an unbelievable enhancement, a great, great benefit to this project. But put simply, we have no interest in bearing a massive investment in this tree without seeing it through, for the years following it move. So I'm going to turn it over to Paul. He's going to give a quick overview, cover a few things. And we kindly ask for y'all's approval of our variance, given kind of the substantial change we made and addressing of your feedback last meeting. Thank you.
Good evening. First of all, is my echo any better?
No, it's pretty bad.
Say again?
It's a little bad,
Better?
getting better.
Okay. So thanks for the opportunity. I'm Paul Cox. I am a regional vice president and principal with environmental design. We are a Texas-based company. We were founded back in the late 70s in Houston and have grown to have offices throughout the country. We have offices not only in Houston, Dallas, Austin, Fort Worth, San Jose, California, San Diego, California, Jacksonville, Florida, Chantilly, Virginia, and in Minneapolis. So we've developed a national footprint over the course of about 40 years. We do work all over the country, and our work is concentrated on moving and preserving giant trees. Recently, we completed a project there in the Charleston area for the run-up to the big golf tournament out at the Ocean Course on Kiowa. We've done several other substantial projects in the area out at Wild Dunes, West Beach at Kiowa Island, several residents out at Isle of Palms, to name a few. We have worked at the White House, at the Supreme Court. We were the contractor designated to provide all of the tree relocation services for the National 9/11 Memorial in Lower Manhattan. We also built out the Flight 93 Memorial in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. We've got a historical success rate for moving giant trees of about 98% over the course of our history. I have what I call living patients all over the country and in actuality all over the world. Aside from our national footprint, we've also done work in places as varying as Dubai, Qatar, Portugal, Spain, China, Israel, Mexico, Panama, Nicaragua. Pretty much wherever there has been a large tree move of any sort of high profile nature, we have generally been involved in it. So we're very confident in our capability to move this tree. And in some ways, this is a great big tree, but it isn't anything near the largest tree we've moved. In fact, I would say it's kind of in the middle of the road in terms of size. And based on, again, I would just kind of piggyback on what Ben said relative to this specific tree is clearly the best candidate, best form, best overall health condition, and could nicely tuck into the spot where it needs to go, and the canopy could be placed such that it would create that really nice overhang into the alleyway. So I'm happy to ask any questions relative to what we do and how we do it, if you have them.
All right, thank you. Eric, is there anybody that was registered to speak in favor or oppose this application, or anybody that wrote in?
Mr. Chairman, we received 0 comments and nobody registered to speak in favor or oppose the project.
Okay, then I believe that we will close the public portion of the meeting for this application, and it'll be open to the board for discussion and questions. And I'll start. I'll say that thank you for. I remember looking at this last time and thinking that that tree that you're wanting to move, I believe we all felt was the best shape. I thought there was discussion at the time of trying to save that grand tree that's King Street over by the pedestrian alley and reshaping the building there. And so I'm saying that to the committee to ask if that was the case, or if I was getting confused on that.
I think you're correct, Joel.
Okay. So I'll ask the committee what their opinion, because really what they've done is I thought we kind of felt like, hey, you need to save this tree, and then let's look at a new design and see if there's any way to do anything else. So they've really swapped trees out. Is that okay with everybody? What are your thoughts on the trees? You know, it'd be great if we could relocate the one and save one.
Who wants to go first? Okay, I will.
All right.
I like the idea of relocating the tree, but I think, really what I think the issue with this project is that all this work was done, and obviously a lot of money spent on architectural plans. And then after there's all this commitment to it and all this energy behind it. And then they finally come to our board when we're sort of, again, we're stuck in that position of, sort of having something forcibly, you're almost forced to approve it, right? And I go back to my feeling that basically, it's a self-imposed hardship because they're amassing the properties. So, and it's beyond this project. Either the ordinance needs to be rewritten for downtown, or we just need to hold the feet to the fire more and because I just think too many trees get approved to be removed. And I'm glad they finally brought, all the landscape architects together to noodle something out. But, this had a life of its own before it got to us. So.
All right. Is there any other thoughts on anybody else have a comment on that?
I'm curious to know what the success rate is on these tree moves. I mean, is there some sort of statistic that this company has as to how successful they've been in the past? It seems like a heavy lift. No pun intended.
Yeah, I thought I heard him say over 98%.
That's what I heard.
So I think it's extremely high.
98%.
So I think I feel confident in their plan to move that tree. I'm saddened by the fact that the one on King Street is still targeted to go, with it being so close to King Street. It just seems like a building could be notched around, and it's currently growing in a small little area, so it's figured out how to survive in poor conditions. But I'd love anybody else's thoughts on that.
Well, I can understand why they didn't necessarily think it was a good candidate for removal. But that doesn't mean that it wouldn't survive well in situ.
Wait. You said removal. You mean
I'm saying
relocating?
To relocate, excuse me.
That's okay. That's clarity. Sorry.
Yeah. But I think it would survive fine, where it's located, right? I can see where maybe it wasn't a candidate to remove, because the only tree locally that I recall, seeing publicly moved was that one over in Mount Pleasant years ago, and it died ultimately at Town Center. But, they obviously have some other local examples, and there are obviously other places that have much stiffer ordinances than ours, since there's a worldwide business in relocating grand trees. So I do have one question, and that was about the alleys. When they were talking last month about the facility that's going to be across the alley, somebody made a comment that these alleys were going to be partly public, but there was a concern about security with that facility. Are they going to be totally open to the public, the pedestrian accesses?
I think we should bring Ben back in, but I believe the answer is absolutely. That's a critical connection between Cannon, Elliott Borough, and King Street.
So it was more their access into the alley rather than the other way around.
Well, I think the residents of this new project will obviously enjoy the alleys, but it is,
Not a
I think Ben, if the chairman agrees, should come back in and answer that question.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we were allowed to ask questions of the applicant. Is Ben unmuted?
Okay, great. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, Ms. Barton, yes, the intention is for that to be public. In fact, we have, you can kind of see it, we've actually got residential stoops onto that alley. And really the intention was to have shifted kind of Rogers north. Right now it's kind of underutilized and I think blocked a little bit. The goal was really to kind of hopefully align it more with the street here mid-block. And it's really kind of a guiding line between the two projects. But yes, the intention is for that to be public.
Okay, because there was somebody said something last time about the alley and security for the people in that facility. So I just wasn't clear.
Yeah, that may have been with their application, Ms. Barton. I believe they're right before us. So.
It definitely was. It definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can't speak for them, so apologies.
I'd like to add my 2 cents on the alley is, and I you have one basic owner, the Evening Post, Post and Courier, whomever, they're working with 2 different developers. The city is in support of the removal of Aiken Court as well as Rogers Alley. The problem in my mind, is that property line, in so many words, doesn't create their own hardship, but it's a property line that works between the 2 developments because they don't have the exact access opposite Bogan or Bogard Street because of those properties that are not in the control of the master developer. So I just want to add that you may think it's self-imposed in your dialogue and your discussion. I see it and I hear it, and it just is by chance that tree happened to be that close to the King Street terminus of the alley. But it's such a critical connection, but they can't move it south because there's houses that are out of their control to the south. So I just wanted to add that bit.
All right. Thank you. Any other comments from the board? Andrew, I'm gonna call you out. I'd love to hear your opinion.
The one thing that troubles me, and I hear what Amanda's saying, and I feel badly for people who take on any projects in this because it is the procedural stuff is kind of kaflooey. But the thing that sticks in my head was, that one tree, not the one that you like up there on King Street, but the one, somebody obviously, and Eric mentioned it last month, they took the time to give it a generous parking planter area. If you look at the way they laid out the curb, they gave that tree some pretty specific growing area. It was a little surprising. That one, yeah. And I'm thinking the guys are here, and I'm not saying you got to move that tree to, obviously that other tree fits exactly where they want it to fit and do exactly what they want it to do. But I'm still thinking, you guys are here. Technically, you could probably move that guy too with a little bit of pruning and find another spot somewhere on the site for that tree. I don't think the cost would be double since the guys are already here from Texas or Jacksonville or Minnesota or wherever they come from. But, if you can move one, why can't you move 2? why do you need a variance to cut it down? Just a thought. I'm not advocating it. I'm just thinking it.
Yes, that's an interesting point. I guess what's the I guess the question is what, let me back up. The procedure is that city staff's in favor, no one is opposed. So we have that as part of our consideration. I think it ultimately comes down to these 3 live oak trees that everybody's struggling with. I don't think people are struggling with the magnolia. We're probably not struggling with the elm.
Yeah, exactly.
It's these live oak trees. And so I guess we would have the opportunity, we have the option of approving exactly as they've asked for, approving with still requiring a tree or 2 trees or something to be worked around, or not approving at all. So we can certainly tailor a motion to fit what our thoughts are about the application. And if it's elm is okay to go, magnolia is okay to go, one of the live oaks is all right to go, the class D trees are fine to go, but move the one large live oak, keep the one up by King Street, plus move the other. That's our, I guess, our call to make. And then it's the applicants to respond and determine if the project still moves forward. At some point, the applicant's going to have a cost analysis where, they have too much money into their site prep to continue moving forward with it. It's not necessarily what we need to be highlighting and thinking about, but at the same time, if we can get the property developed, in my opinion, I think that's a plus. Because when I look at the watercolor drawing of the site and you see those pedestrian alleys, and that I just think about how that is experienced by the public, and it would be better than what's sitting there today.
No doubt.
Yeah.
So, any other? Go ahead, Andrew.
I just said no doubt. I completely agree.
I keep seeing my internet is unstable. Keeps flashing across my screen, so I apologize if I seem like I'm on a delay.
What tree number is the one you were talking about, Andrew?
I believe 6. I think 6 is next to St. Philip.
Can the applicant respond?
I think at this point, unfortunately, it's only if there is a direct question to the applicant.
I would worry that there's not enough room to relocate the trees on this site.
Well, it looks like they added 3 small trees up there next to their, the property they don't control. Nobody's saying they had to be 3 there, right?
Where is
The
that?
one
there.
If you go back to the plan view colored rendering. Yeah, see how they got like 3 trees right there and just to the right of center?
It's by the drive court. Yeah, Eric, you're on it.
Yeah. Mhm.
I mean, I'm not saying, it's not our job to do landscape architecture for them or anything else. I'm just saying that it looks to me like there's space there on it.
I think you'd have to have Ben come in and explain. That's your ingress and egress to the garage and retail deliveries. I don't think it's as large as you think it is for a relocated tree.
that's entirely possible.
Well, if it's all right, Eric, can we get Ben to clarify what's going on in that area for us?
Please.
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
we got you.
Yeah, I mean, again, obviously this is conceptual. I think it's worth mentioning that like the tree relocation, I mean, we're taking incredibly seriously, and Paul could represent this as well, but you know, the protection and the logistics of these trees after they're moved is absolutely critical, and probably more important than the execution of it themselves. And so it was also another reason we liked it there, because it's in the corner of the site. It's adjacent to property that we're not improving already. So in addition to being a great public benefit and something that hopefully is going to enhance that alley, we thought that it's also in a location that's best for it after we move it. It allows us to keep contractors out of there. I mean, y'all seen job sites of this scale. There's 250, 400 people out there on any given day. So kind of tucking it away as best as we possibly can is really, really critical. So I think having any tree in that general area where, you know, we've got perhaps our transformer field and things like that, is going to be really, really challenging. And you know, back to a couple points earlier on just procedurally, like I get it. I know it's kind of late and there's definitely trade-offs here. But you know, we feel that this is a really good trade-off.
All right, so Ben, I'll ask the questions. So that area that Andrew was targeting, when I realized this is conceptual, basically where it says Lion Street, if you just go straight into your property, get past
Yes.
the existing houses that are there, and there's those 3 trees, and it looks like, are those the quote unquote transformer areas that I'm seeing, those 4 little squares?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Or generator field. And you know, another thing that's probably was not noted in too much detail is just the root ball, and making sure that we're not paving or providing any construction activity. That's going to be a very, very busy spot for us logistically. As you'll see here, in terms of kind of hardship, is that we've deliberately only provided access off of Lime Street. I mean, that was a city request. It was a neighborhood request. I mean, for a project this scale, to be able to have kind of 2 skinny entries alone on one street, we think is a real big benefit. You know, there's nothing on King Street or St. Philip curb cut wise. So we're going to have a lot of construction traffic coming in through there. And then if we were to relocate a tree in there, for example, that paving shown around it's not really going to be possible, because we absolutely need to maintain an impervious surface over that ball for a substantial amount of time. So I know it's hard to see per scale, but like that's really, really important to us, and something that Paul was, you know, kind of adamant about on site when we spoke with him. Hope that's helpful.
Thank you, Ben.
Could I jump in? Could I have Ben speak to the, again, I just want to revisit the King Street tree and what you see there as far as the structure. And I think that structure size and shape somewhat relates to the shape that they're given by the master developer, with the cutouts of the existing homes and what have you. And to design a garage to function as you need it to function, of course, you can talk about eliminating units and so on and so forth, but that space that building's occupying, to me, is somewhat driven by the overall shape of the property. I just want to see if Ben can elaborate on that structure.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we absolutely studied it, and it's of course not as simple as just chopping off the corner of that building. You know, to your point, Eric, it would have some substantial effect to really all 4 planned floors at that point in time. And just, we think the shape of it and the health of it as well. We kind of handpicked that central tree. The way that we will be able to shape it over the alley was just really, really attractive to us, from a future use for not only our residents, but the public. So Also, construction logistics, I think, are going to be extremely challenging saving that tree. You know, we are going to be in a type 1 construction condition here. So casting concrete all around that, and then, you know, further skinning that piece of the building and what will be a very tall building right there. You know, just getting our fracos and stuff in there. We're trying to be as mindful as possible that we're not setting ourselves up for failure on a massive construction project like this. We do build everything, and so Graystar will be in charge of this. And so, you know, our reputation for these trees is on the line, just like Paul said, his is on the line as well in the relo. But putting that relo in the southwest corner of the site towards the alley was absolutely deliberate. And we're thinking through, you know, what does a 2-year time frame look like on these either saved trees or relocated trees? And to us, that was absolutely the best trade-off and the best bet for not only the project, but the surrounding kind of community as well.
Thank you. All right. Are there any other comments from board members or thoughts? I guess I'll say I'm 100% in agreement that the tree they selected to relocate and the place they're putting it is correct. I'll buy that. I still have trouble with the King Street tree personally. I guess the issues I have is the arborist, whoever the arborist was, has graded all these trees as B grade trees. That arborist has determined that these trees are doing well. He didn't call it a C, didn't call it a D, and so it's tough to just say, "Yep, go ahead and take them out." But ultimately, you know, once the site is built and the replacement trees are in and start to mature, 5 years down the road, everybody's going to think it was a beautifully planned corner.
Joel, my thought on what the answers, I guess, to that corner, and also to another relocation site. I think they had some very valid answers as far as this. If you were going to save or relocate, that corner to me looks like the cleanest place to do. So I guess, in summary, I think this is definitely a win-win for everybody. Look at what's out there.
All right.
Not the B grade trees.
Well,
I'm just saying, you said it's a win-win. I don't know. Those guys, we asked them, they could talk. I'm sure they'd be just.
Well, I guess one, you know, I guess it's back to a trade-off, you know. You
Agreed.
Yeah.
Project looks solid. Yeah.
I think so. I'll just say I think ultimately it doesn't have to be a complete trade-off. Again, I'll say there could be a motion that's made that says we approve the removal of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the grand trees, relocation of one, and one needs to remain, and then special exception on the removal of another, then remove or omit the 15 protected trees per acre requirement, and then throw it back at the applicant to say, okay, this is what they've given to us. Can we make it work?
Yeah.
And they would have the option of appealing our decision, letting us know we've potentially erred, or we say, yep, we think relocate the one tree. That's great. That's fine. And go from there. I guess we can put some of the pressure back onto Eric's shoulders of making sure we get as many replacement trees on the property as possible. He loves it when pressure is put on his shoulders, is what we've been told. So, yeah, because I can see, I struggle because I can see the corner. Like I said, I think it'd be a beautiful corner, and the city will appreciate, and that corner will be much more viable than what's doing right now. We just got to find the right happy place. But that's it. I will be quiet and I'll let y'all make a motion or continue the discussion.
Can I see the staff recommendations again?
Okay. Lee, could you advance to the staff approval recommendations? Go through slides, trees. So keep in mind, if you approve the 6 via a variance and 1 by special exception, the requirement would be to plant 212.75 caliber inches. That's a number. They won't get it on site, so they'll most likely have to make a contribution to the city street tree program. The protected trees are what they are. They can't meet the 15 trees. So based on the acreage of the site, again, per protected tree removed, it's 5 inches. So there were a number and that equals 250. 4-foot chain link fence for any tree that they may be able to save. That was just thrown in there basically as a protocol. Provide a landscape plan. As you can see, they're working on it. It's conceptual as noted. They got a lot of work ahead of them with the detailing of those alleys and providing sufficient soil volumes for trees and what have you. The live oak, if it were to be removed, it would be my hope that they would salvage the majority of it, repurpose it and use it in the building somehow. And then again, specific to the relocated tree, a preservation plan that is very thorough, very well spelled out, so the city understands every step necessary by the experts and local arborists, including pre, post, watering, monitoring, and then just documentation sent to the city as each protocol step is completed. A 6-foot chain link fence to, once it's moved, that root ball will be, I envision more like a rectangular fenced area around it to protect the crown, the root ball itself, and prevent anything from happening in there. Obviously, an access gate to monitor the soil, moisture, and that sort of thing, but no scaffolding of that nature or anything within. Then, in the event that the tree does not survive, and I put up to 6 years, sometimes live oaks, I'm told, say ouch 2 years later or so when something happens to them. The developer would put on letterhead, and it would be in the plan agreeing that 100% of the DBH inches would be mitigated for in the form of 2 6-inch trees. I went to Shady Grove. I'm not saying that's the nursery of choice, but locally, and they move some fairly large trees. You could talk about a 10-inch tree, a 12-inch tree, but as we all know, younger trees establish faster. So I don't know exactly what that space looks like yet, but 2 6-inch trees in that space where they would have to remove the relocated tree. And then the residual inches would be, again, in the form of a contribution, because obviously the site would be planted by then.
Thank you, Eric. All right, board, what say you?
I'll make a motion to approve with staff recommendations.
All right, so there is a motion by Ms. Ravenel for approval with the staff conditions. Is there a second to her motion?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Mr. Webb. And so I'm gonna go through the roll. Ms. Barton,
Nay, not in favor.
that was nay, not in favor.
Yeah, I'd like to see the King Street tree.
Ms. Ravenel. Aye in favor.
I'm in favor.
All right, Mr. Yuji.
Nay, not in favor.
Mr. Webb,
Aye, in favor.
Ms. Murphy,
I'm gonna go with I in favor.
Mr. Hargit,
I'm thinking.
tell me you're not flipping a coin.
Yeah, 13 pieces of silver to see a large tree moved and saved, and I don't know, sell out the rest. I mean, that's essentially what we're looking at, right?
Yeah, and it is a crazy amount of replacement trees with the 250 inches plus the 212 inches. There's a lot of replacement.
Yeah, there is. Is that 13 pieces of silver enough? That's the question, right? You know what? I'm gonna say I in favor. I don't like it.
The Hargit says I in favor, and I'm going to say nay, not in favor, because I would have liked the fruit tree, but ultimately the motion will be approved 4-3. So it is approved. Thank you for your time and the presentation. Eric, are we ready to go to B1?
Yes, sir.
All right, so B1 is 137 Brogan Lane. The TMS number is 35809000182. Application number is 210602B1. Requested variance from section 54.327 to allow the removal of 1 grand tree zoned SR1.
Okay, so 137 Brogan, variance to remove 1 tree, SR1. This is the application. This site is located on Brogan Lane in Chathamos against the golf course. So SR1. It's one of the few vacant lots, and I'll have to remind some of the members on the board, I'll leave it at this aerial for now. This tree that we're going to speak about in just a few moments was actually approved in 2016. You'll find that it's somewhat centrally located, but I want to keep it there it has some other grand trees around the perimeter. But what happened is the owner did not pull the trigger to build the house, and then also failed to use the vested rights ability, or his right for vested right to extend it for 1 year. So it expired. So, all right, so let's go next slide, please. So this is the original approval from September 5th, 2012. I think, I said 16, I apologize, 2012. It's been that number of years. Centrally located, 28-inch oak at the time. Conditions there. This is the new proposal. They kind of flipped the house, put the driveway on the left, but either way, the tree is still centrally located. The 2 dots at the porch are 2 different species, 18 and a 20, and then we have a larger tree to the right of the steps. So if we go to the next slide. The more recent, I believe, proposed purchaser, the individual ready to purchase this lot, had Bartlett go out. A little confusing in the report. I questioned some of the labeling, and I tried to get that clarified. But anyway, it's my belief it's a laurel oak, as you see photoed there. Next slide, please. It does have a slight hole in the base. Next slide. And this is some canopy shots. They're the 2 different species of trees. They're not grand. on the right. Next slide. You can almost see by the bark, and then a pecan tree.
That's poison ivy.
And nut bearing trees obviously leaf out later, so I'm not quite sure the condition of that right now, but next slide. So there are the city photos. Again, 34-inch laurel oak grade C for sale sign out front. And my belief is that you can't build a house on that lot. It's just too centrally located. It was previously approved, so staff recommends approval with the same conditions. Must plant 3 4-inch live oaks on the lot, and the residual DBH is in the form of contribution to the city street tree program. But then the additional, the actual stated condition was to make $150 monetary contribution to the city, use 4-foot chain link fence for the other trees, and have a certified arborist. And we will work with the applicant on those rear stairs to get further away. They can tweak those stairs if you look back at the site plan, but that's that's the recommendations. And Lee, you may have to help me identify the individual, or can we have the individual raise their hand? I'm hoping they're with us tonight. Being on vacation, I didn't really have time to follow up. If you go back to the application, anybody raise their hand, Scott?
Do not see anyone, no.
Can we go back to what the request is?
Yes, remove 1 grand tree, laurel oak. So we have an owner. If you go to the application, Lee. Linda Sprague. I needed to be reminded of that name. Is Austin or Linda with us tonight? If so, raise your hand. And then the owner, the applicant, is the purchaser, and I'm not quite sure how that name would be pronounced.
Connie.
Austin or Linda, we've had communication.
Eric, this is Lee. I don't see either one of them in the attendee list.
Okay. Nor the purchaser
Don't see him either.
here. Well, I know we've had communication in the week before and what have you, and I don't know what to do. I guess we'll have to defer or just.
I don't know. I think I realize they're not here, but we approved it before. It seems pretty straightforward. I'd agree with you that it could be built. We could probably still go through it. I mean,
Yeah, if you look at the approval, the previous approval, Lee, you'll see that I think they were the purchasers at that time, I think, is the way it is. They purchased the lot and then they didn't build because the owner is different, but the applicant was A.M. Sprague. So anyway, it's been a little challenging, but.
so
No, sorry, go ahead.
no, you go ahead, Jeff.
I was just going to confirm nobody in opposition.
Yes, sir. That's right, Mr. Chairman. Nobody's up to speak in favor or oppose the application.
I think we can proceed.
Okay.
And at that point, the board, they can make a decision to defer because the applicant's not here, or we can just approve it if that's what they feel. I lean towards approving it.
I feel generally that, if we've previously approved something, it should get approved the next time. And I think, with the resident, a homeowner is not as up on the vested rights and how everything works in the way that, if they had a consultant, doing it for them. So
Agreed.
being a resident, I have to say, I think that, I can see where they might not totally realize that they really should come to the meeting and then letting it lapse. So.
Well, and it looks like this approval was part of the sale, the transaction in 2012. So I feel like I wouldn't want to remove that right to build on a property that they've already gotten approval for. So I'll make a motion to approve.
All right.
A second.
All right. So we have a motion for approval by Ms. Ravenel, seconded by Ms. Barton. We'll go through the roll. Ms. Barton.
Aye, in favor.
Ravenel.
Aye, in favor.
Mr. Yuji.
I in favor.
Mr. Webb.
Aye in favor.
Ms. Murphy.
I in favor.
Mr. Hargit.
I in favor.
And Mr. Adrian is aye in favor. It's 7-0. All right, so we're going to move on to item B2. And it says it's just Teresa Drive, TMS number 424100030, application number 210602B2. Request a variance from section 54.347 to allow the reduction in a required landscape buffer zoned STR and DR1.
Next slide. This is the application for Teresa Drive, SGA, and Mr. Bill Ukes will be joining us here in a minute. All right. This is their narrative as how they meet the hardship test. So you see a property here that actually has a line through it. That line has been abandoned. And actually that line was the zoning line. So the portion touching Teresa Drive at one time was zone STR. They recently went through a process to rezone the entire property to DR1. Next slide, Lee, you'll see how that happens. So you can see where the zoning line was, and they were successful getting it all zoned DR1. The history on this, I'll go to the next slide, Lee, please. So you can kind of see that there's a gravel area coming off of Teresa Drive, and then what is a clearing further back into the property. The reason for this is that this project was TRC approved. The developer at the time was sticking with the STR zoning and then the multi-family zoning to the rear. And where that gray driveway was going to be a short court, if you will, with single family attached houses to the east and to the west. And then that court would have led into a driveway for two multifamily structures on the DR. So we went through TRC, major subdivision, because of the single family attached units of the public road and then the multifamily. Well, this got caught up in the first recession back in 2007 and 8. So the developer pulled the trigger, cleared the land, and then never proceeded with building permits. Obviously, the property went back on the market, and we have a proposal to do all multifamily. So I want you to be conscious of the previous clearing that occurred. So next slide, please, Lee. Again, just mixed housing types. We've got duplexes, we've got singles, we've got maybe even some quads. Next slide, please. This is the cleared area. You can see the marketing real estate sign. So pretty significant clearing. As a matter of fact, I believe this board addressed a grand tree or two at the time. It abuts the marsh along I-526. It has the buffer along I-5 or the James Island connector. And then because of the zoning at the time, it didn't require buffers to the left and right of this entrance. Next slide, please. So this is a view of the west side from standing in, Teresa's. So the property to the right of the entrance has somewhat been impacted by the previous clearing. You can see there's a silt fence line right there with basically no trees, but then there are a few trees along the common property line. The east side, the top photo looking the other direction, again, the clearing, because it was compatible at the time, cleared basically up to the property line. Next slide. I want to thank Lee for controlling because I'm on a tablet. So here's the applicant's exhibit. So this is the cover sheet. So you can see how they're setting themselves up for a private drive with basically 6 pods of attached looking type units, but they're not fee simple lots. It's just on, multifamily. Next slide, please. There's the existing conditions. Next slide. The applicant's photos of adjacent properties. Next slide. So here you have it. So as you note, the dashed lines represent required buffer lines. So along the James Island connector, 50-foot buffer. Along the marsh, you have the 40-foot OCRM critical line buffer, and then a 10-foot building setback, that line that kind of parallels that. And then due to the rezoning, the DR, multifamily, against STR, that would be the property to the plan west, and then the property plan east is actually in the county if we were to go back at our, but it's residential. So required 25-foot landscape buffer. What they're proposing is to provide a 9-foot landscape buffer and plant it heavily, as you can see. Next slide, please. There's their plant list. Next slide. This is the housing type, and also they're proposing a fence, a wood slat fence in that 9-foot zone. Next slide. So staff recommends approval with the conditions that must maintain the minimum 9-foot minimum width buffer and plant the type D. They were suggesting that because it's a narrower buffer, they would reduce type A in their dialogue, but I think we can, space the required type D plants out and get the number of canopy trees, understory trees, and shrubs. Must maintain existing protected trees along the perimeter and along the frontage. If you go back to a couple of those images and we can in a minute, there's a few trees that were left standing when the previous approved plan, so we'll maintain those protected trees. Must provide a quality 6-foot in height opaque fence instead of the slat. I think redesign that fence so it's totally opaque along the common property line with the residential lot. Must provide a landscape plan for both. This will have to go through DRB because of its frontage on the James Island connector, DRB and TRC review. And Mr. Chairman, nobody signed up to speak in favor or oppose this application. So with that said, we can promote Bill Eubanks. Bill, can you hear us?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Mr. Eubanks, this is Chairman Adrian. I'm going to swear you in And if you would state your full name and address for the record, and you'll be able to
Yes.
presentation, okay?
With SGA now.
All right.
804 Meeting Street.
All right. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, to help you God?
I do.
All right. The floor is yours.
Thank you. So Eric, this may be the first time I've ever done this, but I'm going to correct you. Actually kept a small strip of STR along Teresa Drive to make sure that what was on Teresa Drive would be the same as it would have been without a rezoning, but we did shift the DR1 line forward towards Teresa Drive a little bit. So it was a partial rezoning.
Okay, very good. Thanks for that correction.
Betcha. So like Eric said, we've got a lot of buffers on this side. We've got the 40-foot no-touch buffer on the critical line that eats up about 0.29 acres of our site. We've got the 50-foot buffer along the connector. So all of that together eats up about 35% of our site, not including the 25-foot buffer. So the way I understand this, and this is the way it was explained to us also at TRC, we're building townhomes. We're building single-family attached product, but it's being, they will be rental units, not fee simple units. So that puts us as our land use as multifamily instead of our land use as single-family detached. And that's what triggers the 25-foot buffer. And with the other constraints on this site, it's shape, just the overall configuration, the other buffers that we're subject to, that 25-foot buffer along the sides is going to be very restrictive for us. So that's why we are asking for a buffer that would be a minimum of 9 feet. It's about 12 feet in most areas. It only narrows down to 9 feet in a couple of really, really small areas. So mostly a 12-foot. We were asking for a type A buffer, but we are amenable to staff's recommendation of planting that as a type B buffer, and also including the 6-foot opaque wooden fence along the property line. And also just want to note that, this is the only property on Teresa Drive that's subject to DRB approval. And I mean, it's going to be a beautiful product. We're working with Allison Ramsey Architects out of Beaufort to design the townhomes. And we think it'll be a great addition to the neighborhood. And when you drive up and down the street, there's a real mishmash of building types, hardly any buffering between any properties. So this would be a rather extreme buffer on Teresa Drive. And we feel like the amount of landscaping that we're putting in and with the addition of the fence will adequately buffer this project from the neighbors. So ask y'all to approve it.
All right, thank you, Bill. If there's nobody else on your team that needs to speak, then we'll close the application to the public and it'll be open to the board for discussion. Bill, is there anybody else that needs to speak?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. All right, so it's open to the board. I'll start off and just throw out, I guess I don't see the hardship along right off of Teresa, because we could take our triplexes and make them duplexes on both sides and we meet the landscape buffer. I guess maybe actually before getting there, if I can ask a question of you, Bill, have the property owners adjacent been approached and shown this plan so they know what you're wanting to build and how close you're going to build it to the property line?
Am I unmuted?
Yes.
Yes, we sent letters out to all of the property owners that are adjacent to and across the street from our property, and we included site plans with those letters and asked them to reach out to us if they had any questions, and we didn't hear back from anyone.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, I'll conclude because personally, as I look at it, I feel like when you come in off of Teresa Drive, that those first 4 buildings could be shifted or redesigned, and then I'm not as concerned about the 5 units that are backing up to the adjacent property, and the 5 units that back up to the wetlands or the marsh or whatever. They can maybe slide towards the proposed retention pond and get out of that buffer there. So you can really just have that one area where you'd have a 9-foot buffer. You can maintain the 25-foot buffer around the rest of the property. But I'll let anybody else put their 2 cents in.
I think,
Joel, I was just going to say, you can see the outline of, think of the homes as on the left and the right side.
Yeah.
And you can see that one is fairly close on that side. So I kind of share your thought about, as you get farther to the back, I would be less concerned about buffering the neighbors. But
yeah, I'm in agreement with both y'all, though. I don't really have a problem with the one in the rear on the left encroaching close there, given the fact that was always going to be multifamily home. It's been that way forever, but I'm with you to the front was supposed to be single family and originally, and now they want to do multifamily, which is fine. But I'm like you, they could make them duplexes or they could turn them or whatever they got to do. But I think that along that Teresa line, those are both single story homes. I see.
Yeah.
I'm with you on that.
Eric, on the southern portion of the site, this is that an emergency vehicle kind of turnaround area in between the 2 ponds?
Yes, they have to meet the fire code. Greater than 150 feet, they need to provide a modified cul-de-sac, hammerhead, something of that sort to address fire. And then those 2 circles are obviously stormwater.
Right. But yeah, so I would agree. The looking at this, plan is the north is up, so the 5 units on the left side at the rear. I don't have an issue with that. I think that'd be the only area that I'm comfortable saying you could reduce your buffer to 9 feet. The rest of it, I think, should be maintained as what's.
what about the right hand side, Joel?
I think I don't know.
I mean, not the right. I guess I can't.
So on the
here.
eastern side, those 5 that back up to the marsh or whatever, I feel like they could slide towards that retention pond. You got those 3 little parking spaces across the way. You could almost make retention there or something, maybe, or I don't know, something could be modified, I think, and moved. Although I guess I think they can move them, and really just deal with that one building. But I wouldn't personally hold up if y'all said both of those units at the back could encroach. Just the 4 in the front need to be redesigned.
That's where I'm at.
Yeah.
Aren't there also houses adjacent to the second row of
No.
triplexes?
There's ranch on Plan West. There's a ranch, and then there's another type of ranch on the east. With
Yeah.
Go back to the aerial if you would, please. Okay, so once you pass that first row.
Yeah, they've got pretty deep backyards, those houses, it looks like.
Right. 1509, 1523.
So we could say something like within the first 150 feet.
I think you could just say that the buildings up by Teresa need to be redesigned. You need to maintain that 25-foot buffer along those side property lines, and then once it gets to the rear, it can be reduced to 9 feet.
Where is the difference between the 2 zonings on the site? Because Bill made a correction to that.
Yes, and I wasn't aware of that. I didn't. Our maps are obviously behind, but Christopher Morgan ran the rezoning through. So was that 25 feet saved as STR at the front, Bill?
Yes, and it's about where you've got the red dot. It's about through the middle of that kind of alley. So that the units that front Teresa Drive are under STR. And one of the requirements of STR zoning is that the townhomes have to front a public right of way.
Okay. All right, are there any other questions or comments?
Have to front a public right of way?
Yes, that's correct. They have to front a public right of way, so they could not be turned sideways.
So this is going to be a public street in here?
No, Teresa Drive, the ones that front Teresa Drive have to front Teresa Drive because they're under the STR zoning.
Yeah, but aren't I looking at the backyards there? Fronting Teresa, you're just saying the building has to.
They have to address the public right of way. They can't be turned sideways to it.
Front door needs to face Teresa Drive for those proposed 6 units at the front, and then the next 6 back, you could turn them, rotate them, spin them, do whatever you want. But the first ones, as soon as you come off Teresa, I should see 6 or 4 front doors.
So that changes a little bit. So Lee may have to jump in here. So if the red line is where STR got moved, and I wasn't clear on that, I knew it went through rezoning. I thought it was the whole thing. So STR, the units up front require a 25 front setback, but then that unit against STR would have no buffer. So north of Lee's red line would be no buffer required, correctly? Because it's compatible.
So I'm just wondering if the front is still zoned STR, I'm wondering if what is being proposed here on this site plan is permitted under the zoning. Because STR is, you can do 2 townhouse units attached, but you can't do 3 in a row. And those 2 townhouse units have to be fee simple units, I believe. I'm wondering about that.
So it sounds like we have to recommend deferral. I was not aware of I thought the whole thing got rezoned, Bill. I apologize. I didn't know it was just a small shift in the zoning line. So we have to, I think, re-examine this.
And I think that's fine, because I think Bill has at least some direction of what the board was thinking. So he needs to work with Lee on what the zoning is going to allow, make some modifications, and then can also further modify based off of what he's heard today. So when he comes back, he can have an application that he feels really confident in.
Yes. I did not understand the rezoning wasn't the entire parcel.
So let's do, if someone would make the motion for deferral.
I make a motion for deferral.
I'll
All
say.
right. Paula, that was you that made the motion, right? Seconded by Amanda. So let's go through the roll. Ms. Barton,
I in favor.
Ravenel,
I in favor.
Mr. Yuji,
I in favor.
Mr. Webb,
I in favor.
Ms. Murphy,
I in favor.
Mr. Hargit,
I in favor.
and Mr. Adrian's I in favor. So that is 7-0. Bill, sorry about that. But look forward to seeing your application in the future.
Thank you.
So you're welcome. So we will go to the final item, which is item B3, and that is 584 Meeting Street. TMS number is 45901030045. Our application number 210602B3. Request a variance from section 54.327 to omit the 15 protected trees per acre requirement. Request a variance from section 54.327 to allow the removal of 2 grand trees. Request a special exception from section 54.327 to allow the removal of 2 grand trees to zone GB.
Very good, thank you. And we will modify this to the request for a special exception to allow one grand tree because one is a grade F. So
Okay, thank you.
next. This is the application by Forsberg Engineering on behalf of their client, Meeting Street Acquisitions LLC. Their responses to the hardship test. Lee, I'm sorry, if you could back up one, please. Note the verbiage in the paragraph, second column, second paragraph. This site apparently in its past history was an industrial site of some sort, and they are under a VCC, which is a voluntary cleanup contract with DHEC. So I just wanted to point that out. We'll have more discussion about that. All right, thank you, Lee. Next. All right, and one more. These are the documents that they submitted, one with a DHEC letterhead and a course, and then one from SCS Engineers, the consultant. I did not include the very lengthy reports, but it's pretty in-depth and it has to do with the VCC, contaminated soils. Next slide. All right, this is a fairly large parcel, presently the home of a AME church, I believe, and then a number of years they went through TRC and were going to build a fellowship hall and then abandoned the project. So you have a church building and then a partially constructed structure next and associated parking. Zone GB, bound by Nassau, Stewart, and Meeting. There it is. There's your church, Eastside Baptist. I'm sorry, not an AME, Eastside Baptist. And then they built a hyphen, if you will, and then like a support admin or fellowship hall, which is just basically walled and roofed. There's no windows. Existing parking, gate entrance on Stewart, and as well as a driveway on Meeting. And then to the north, you have an abandoned corner building. Not really sure of its history. And then a warehouse metal building on Hugie with a laydown area. Next slide. This is the corner of Nassau and Stewart. Notice that there's no sidewalks. There is curb, but no sidewalk. So this project will require the construction of new sidewalks. Obviously, as it moves through TRC, we'll determine whether the telegraph poles are in the way or not. But yes, next slide. So existing conditions, basically all perimeter trees protected and a couple of grands that are boundary trees. Next slide. So this is the diagram indicating the grands. You got a C, live oak, the southern tree on Nassau that would be planned right, and then a elm tree, which you can see through literally, that's an F, and then a water oak and another live oak, or laurel oak and a live oak. Next slide. So number 5 is the 11, 12, 16 live oak C. It's a multi-stem, but heavily pruned by the utility company. You'll see that in a minute. Tree number 9 is north of that, the green dot on Nassau labeled F, that's hollow elm. And then your D grade water oak, I misspoke earlier. 9, 12, 15 water oak, so that's your special exception. It's basically a volunteer. And then tree number 22, a 14, 17 live oak, V crotch, and a very severe lean, if you will. I put a BC on that one. All right. Next slide. The proposed is a multifamily mixed use with pretty significant office retail wrapping Meeting and Stewart, and then relocating all ingress and egress off of Meeting, off of Stewart, will come in off of Nassau. So you have a parking garage with ingress, egress, and then some support facility rooms adjacent to Nassau. Next slide. This is the arborist markup and report. Next slide. So there's numerous hackberries, mulberry, volunteers along the northern fence line. There are a few decent younger live oaks, in the parking lot area. But next slide. So there's your live oak. You can see that there's a dead hackberry, but also the whole tree has been really severely pruned and leans. You can see it's multi-stem or codominant stem structure. The elm, number 9, picture right, and you can see literally through the trunk in that photo, and it's partially dead in the top. Next slide. Here's tree number 21, the 9, 12, 15 water oak. Again, very weak connections at the base, partial fence growing through it. And then the 14, 17 live oak BC, you can see again, a double leader. Now these are considered, in my opinion, boundary trees. The applicant has been working with the neighbors and could not quite garner letters of consent by the meeting, I've been told, but absentee owners and that such, but they've had contact with them and there's no issue. You can see how far that live oak leans over the present driveway. All right. Perimeter trees, dead hackberries, others leaning away from the steel structure to the north, and just volunteers. And of course, we know the issues with hackberry. All right. So city recommends approval with conditions. Must plant 88.5 for the grands, 50 inches for the protected, for a total of 138 canopy trees on the project site. It's going to be difficult, as you noticed on the site plan. It's a pretty much structure all the way across the lot. So therefore, probably making a pretty significant contribution to the city street tree program, and must provide written consent from the neighboring property owners in which the trees need to be boundary trees. So Mr. Jeffrey Roberts and Trey Linton and or Mike Johnson with Forsberg. Good evening, Trey.
Eric Jeff Roberts. I'm going to let Trey go first if he's on.
Okay.
I see Trey, and we've got you, Jeffrey.
Yes.
This is Chairman Adrian. I'm going to start by swearing y'all in. And do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, sir.
And Trey?
I do.
Okay, thank you. Now, if before you speak, just state your full name and your address for the record, and then continue on.
Trey Linton, 1587 Savannah Highway.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joel. As Eric mentioned, I'm Trey Linton with Forsberg Engineering, and the co-developer Jeffrey Roberts and his team are also present tonight. Eric did a good job of summarizing our request. There's a few things I think we'd like to reiterate. One, this specific area is historically light industrial, and the trees in question are basically volunteer trees and not part of a formal landscape plan. They're mostly perimeter trees. Two, the majority of the trees are around the perimeter of the frontage area. Since the site has road frontage on 3 sides, our opinion would be planting trees along the road frontages as part of a planned landscape plan will help enhance the road frontages on all sides. Lastly, as Eric alluded to at the beginning, historically, this site is industrial and the site has contaminated soils. It is subject to a VCC, which is a voluntary cleanup contract. To us, this is an extraordinary circumstance, and remediation efforts on this site will certainly impact these trees as we move forward. Appreciate the opportunity to present. I'll turn it over to Jeffrey, and we look forward to answering any questions y'all may have.
Jeff Roberts, 42 Broad Street, on the development team. Thank you, Mr. Schultz, Mr. Batchelder, and the rest of the board. Just to give you about a 60-second background, the Eastside Missionary Baptist Church was moving off the peninsula for about 3 years and had a contract to sell this property with a suitor that was about a year long, and about a week before the due diligence ran out and they had to pay off their mortgages and other pressing obligations. The suitor, in the last week of a 1-year due diligence, sent an environmental report in that had significant lead readings throughout portions of the site into DHEC, and ultimately that threw it into a little bit of turmoil. So ultimately, we paid off the church's obligations, went through a very, very significant environmental testing program with STS Engineering, and Nelson Mullins acted as on our behalf, and we came up with a very, very comprehensive voluntary cleanup to remediate primarily considerable amount of lead from the soils. Just as a byproduct, we are also, the church has acquired a site in Cross County Road and Dorchester Road, which we are designing and constructing for them, just as subject matter experts, because we are that friendly with them. So I just wanted to give you a little background there. The VCC will call for excavation of the soils in the entire perimeter and exporting them off-site. So during this particular process, it is virtually impossible, as we're removing contaminated soil conditions, really not to impact the root systems of all these volunteer trees and trees in poor condition and the boundary tree. We've also been in contact with the neighbor, and we're not going to have any problem getting that particular letter, okay, to remove the boundary tree. That's leaning.
All right, thank you. Is there anything else that you need to add?
I'm good unless you have any questions. Trey and I are here to answer.
Excellent, thank you. Eric, is there anybody else registered to speak in favor or opposed?
Mr. Chairman, nobody registered to speak in support or opposition.
Okay, we will close this application to the public and it'll be open to the board for discussion. And I don't even know, I guess I'll begin with, unfortunately, the trees are not what we were looking at earlier in the day. They're not great specimen trees. I hate the fact that the site gets consumed completely with a building and that we don't have space to actually put these mitigation trees back on site. But I don't know that we have any authority over that. I think that's probably in other people's hands. So, I'll leave it up to everybody else.
I have a question, and it's an environmental question, because I remember when, for instance, back when the aquarium was done and there was the old coal gasification plant down off of Calhoun, and they did they basically capped the site in that case. Is lead something does lead migrate differently in the soil that you would be removing it as compared to some other contaminants? Because the building, basically, since you're building this thing over the entire site, in a way you would ask, why does it have to be remediated?
Well, if there's any lead, ma'am, if there's any lead in the soils over a certain amount, which the environmental agency got hits, you're right on that it would be capped. But what ultimately has to happen is the building, and the building would ultimately cap it along, obviously the slab, but what has to happen is lead contaminated soils has to be removed with, based on our cleanup plan, and then fresh soils need to be brought in, and then it would be ultimately capped. So, you know, a backhoe has to be gone in, Terracon, our geotechnical engineers has to supervise it, along with SCS engineering for the work plan. So a lot of these soils have to get dug up, fresh pit dirt brought in, and then it ultimately will be capped with the slab. Did that answer it? Thank you.
Okay, does anybody else have a comment or question? This is your ball, Mr. Webb. This is kind of your groove here.
Hey, I didn't do too good in chemistry.
Everything seems like it makes sense. I mean, in order to get rid of the lead in the soil, things have to happen. Trees, roots, everything gets disturbed. Trees didn't start out in the best of condition and health, and I can't imagine it goes in a positive direction from there. But
Well, the one thing I have to say that was a little disingenuous in the presentation was about the street trees that they're going to be adding, which they will be required to add regardless. So,
That's very true. It most likely, due to the height of the building, will be a 10-foot sidewalk as well, I believe. And of course, Rodney and Parks will be working with, with the introduction of a sidewalk, which is very much needed in this up and coming neighborhood on Nassau and Stewart. So you'll have most likely curb, tree lawn. Maybe the trees will be in planting pits, but huge improvement for walkability, pedestrian access.
we're going to rue the day that that there's no green space left downtown as we continue to subside and the flooding gets worse and there aren't as many planted areas to suck up the water. But
very, very true argument. But the other hand, sprawl versus get people where need the people with transit and everything else. But I understand.
all right, well, if there are no other, go ahead.
I agree with Joel. The only tree that I would have, any compunction about would be that I don't see, you can't, you'd be totally in half of the root zone, so it doesn't make any sense to try to keep it.
Right. Does anybody have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve with staff recommendations.
All right.
Second.
Is that Mr. Yuji, would you second?
Yes, I second.
All right. All right, so the motion is for approval with staff conditions, seconded by Ms. Barton, seconded by Mr. Yuji. Let's go through the roll. Ms. Barton?
I'm in favor.
Ravenel?
I in favor.
Mr. Yuji?
I in favor.
Mr. Webb?
I in favor.
Murphy?
I in favor.
Mr. Hargett?
I in favor.
And Mr. Adrian's I in favor, so it is approved 7-0. Thank you, and that will conclude our meeting.
Thank you, everybody.
Yes, yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Have a nice vacation, Eric.
Very good. Thank you.
Eric, you get some extra time for this one.